Good afternoon. Welcome to today's webinar, Motor Vehicle Product Liability, a one-hour interactive webinar which will focus on the issues that both plaintiff and defense attorneys can incorporate into their practice. During this presentation, our expert will cover the following topics: failure of airbags, seat belts, seat backs, child seats, crash worthiness, vehicle design issues, and tires. The program will also cover commonly used sources for research. Today's presenter is Mr. Frank Costanzo. He's a traffic accident reconstruction specialist with over 1,500 full-scale collision investigations and component defect evaluations. Frank is a certified court expert with over 24 years of experience in collision reconstruction, defect investigations, biomechanical analysis, and injury causation studies. If you have a question that pertains to this presentation, please use the Q&A or chat feature, which is found on the right-hand side of the screen. Our presenter, Frank Costanzo, will do his best to answer your questions during the 2 question and answer breaks that we have during the presentation. Approximately 1 hour after the event, we'll send out an email with a link to the archived recording of the webinar. We do ask that you take the survey that will appear on your screen after the event is over. Sit back, relax, and enjoy. I'm now going to turn the presentation over to Frank. Frank, it's all yours.
Thanks, everybody, for attending. Since the latest news seems to be about motor vehicle product liabilities and failures of components, put together a PowerPoint to give you some basic knowledge in what we see as experts and what you probably see as attorneys. Let's get started. The reason why product liability attorneys use collision reconstruction experts, in almost every reconstruction, there's always a speed reconstruction. There's always a defect investigation. We walk you through how to proceed through the defect investigation. And even specialized areas in research, you deal with people from the NHTSA, from ODI, the Office of Defect Investigations, and for the automobile companies. You'll hear a lot of terms. People who do this for a living are pretty aware of skid marks and yaw marks. But the one thing you'll hear over and over again when you do product liability cases is crush deformation and the term delta V. Delta V is a term that collision experts use to determine the force of a collision. So if you had a delta V of, say, a 30, it's a change of velocity. What a delta V of 30 means, for instance, the best explanation would say if a vehicle is traveling 30 miles an hour and crashes into a wall, it goes from 30 to 0, so the delta V, the collision severity, is 30. In cases you're doing collision defect investigations, I would highly recommend you have a means of being able to reconstruct or calculate the delta V for the subject vehicle. The most commonly used method for calculating delta V is a crush analysis. This was a triple fatal, and I'll speak from experience because I'm in the Pennsylvania, New Jersey area, but this happened on the way actually down to the Atlantic City casinos. The blue vehicle, situated down on the right-hand side, struck the other vehicle from behind. We're able to take crush measurements off the cars. We know what the vehicle specifications are. We can take crush measurements and put these types of crush measurements in the computer programs, and it will generate delta V collision variables for us. And it's very important, and I'll discuss later why it's so important. But as you can see in these cases, when we're doing this type of case, the overriding thing is we have to have access to the vehicle that the product is involved with. And a lot of people call and have a product liability case but don't have both the cars. I would highly recommend, if it's a collision with 2 vehicles, you may be the attorney defending or the plaintiff at the lower vehicle, but it's so highly important to get the other vehicle. For instance, without the other vehicle, the error rate on these delta V calculations run around 15% with both vehicles. If you only have one vehicle, the error rate can go almost to about 30%. So as you can see, if we want a real specific calculation, we want to be able to get both vehicles. I'm going to go over some expert determination, give you some examples, and tell you why some of them aren't even failures. And we'll have a Q&A halfway through the presentation. So hold your questions. Certainly write them down. I have a couple that was already sent to me, and I'll be glad to try to answer any one we can. I used to work for the Children's National Medical Center in Washington, and I did defect investigations for fatalities and serious injuries of children. So we dealt with a lot of factory problems and supposed defects of child seats. The reason why I want to give you a couple slides of this one, it is of interest to me, and I'll show you how you can get misled. This was a Chevy Cavalier, Plymouth Acclaim, one of the smaller vehicles. This child was brought into the hospital, and it was a fatality. And we called the police, and the police reconstructionist told us, not much I can tell you, nothing out of the ordinary, seems like a clear-cut case. And he inferred that the child seat was properly installed and there was no problems. Well, we requested to go see the car, and when I went to see the car, I pulled out the back seat. Under the back seat, this is kind of weird not having people in front of me, but under the back seat, you can see the restraint system. So the first thought is, how do you properly restrain a car seat if you don't have the restraint system? Well, when you see the product, it was a Century Toddler seat. It was an 85. It was a rear seating position. It was the right size, weight for the child that was involved in the case. But when we took a good look at this child seat, you see the following information. We can mark these yellow piece of tapes on the child seat on the left side were actually what we call impact marks or direct contact marks, either skin transfers, blood transfers. What happens in these child seats, the reason why a child in a rear collision is exposed, they basically are going sideways, equal and opposite to the force. A properly positioned child would sometimes, in my experience, hit these wings. And we'll see, that's why we take a look at the child seat to make sure that the child seat's not the source of the injuries. But on the right-hand side, you'll see the child seat. And you see that green arrow pointing to that piece? And well, what is that piece when we took a look at it? And when you take a closer look at it, what the person did, they didn't have both the male and female sections of the seatbelt. So this individual's idea of properly restraining this car seat was actually to tie a section of the restraint system in a knot around the base of the child seat. Obviously, this thing's not properly installed. And the reason why I kind of bring this up and want to make you aware of this type of information, when we do child recalls and child product liabilities, it is extremely important not only you have the child seat, but you have the vehicle that it came in. And most of the time, you won't have the child seat still in the car itself when we go look at it. The reason for that is when the EMTs go to respond to these types of accidents, they don't have all kinds of car seats in their EMT vehicles, the ambulances. So a lot of times what they'll do is the child that's injured, they'll actually take the child and the child seat together and put it in the ambulance. The reason why these child seat product liability cases are so difficult is the lack of information. Because in most hospitals, once that child seat goes to the hospital, it is destroyed. They don't want to give the child seat back to the owner. In fact, they're not allowed to give it back to the owner. And most of the times in the emergency room, they'll crack the seats and throw them in the garbage can. can't move forward with a product liability for a child seat if we don't have the seat. So these are the types of issues we really have to get on top of these, this case specifically. Got to get on top of these cases quickly. The reason why I also bring this case up is I did this case for the federal government, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. I got a call 2 years later from a plaintiff's attorney down in Washington wanting the seat back, and I still had the seat. And he told me that he talked to the mother, and the mother said, you know, she doesn't know, everything was fine, she did everything right. So I think sometimes we can get misled by either plaintiff or defendant in regards to what they did correctly or not did correctly in a lot of these product liability cases. And I guess I should have said the first thing I wanted to tell everybody is, in any product liability case, they're expensive. They're expensive on the expert side. They're expensive on the research side. So when you have a case, and of all these ranging cases we'll talk about, just make sure you have a case that warrants the financial, you know, input you're going to have on these cases. When we do seatbelt cases, when we're determining whether a seatbelt failed or not, the most important thing is to prove that the person involved in the case was wearing a seatbelt. And we can look at the injury patterns. This was a little girl sitting in the right front. The scar or healing wound you see near her right collarbone was a seatbelt burn. So we can actually evaluate these seatbelts to make sure we know, if we're going to move forward, that the person was wearing a seatbelt involved in the case. Same thing with it. This is another indication of an injury pattern. This is a little child that was in a child seat. So it's important that, you know, most good hospitals, we can actually get pictures. I want to talk about airbags. Airbags are almost in every car now. Every car that's produced, except for like the medium, heavy-duty vehicles, have airbags. This was the case that came through. Obviously, and I tell people it has to pass one test. When we put these photos in front of a jury, is the jury first going to believe, yes, without hearing anything else, yes, that airbag should have deployed? And in this case, you can see this BMW took a pole impact right to the driver's door. On the right side, you can see the side thoracic airbag just didn't deploy. And my experience on these product liabilities and these airbag cases are that a lot of the times they're repair issues. So you're really focusing in on the person that did the repair of this vehicle, and that's what was this case. He was in a prior accident, had his airbag deployed, had someone go in, fix the airbag, and he didn't fix it properly. I would highly recommend, just on a personal level, if you are in an accident and your airbag's deployed, certainly bring them to the like a Ford dealer or a Toyota dealer, whoever you bought the vehicle from. That type of dealer has the capability of properly fixing these airbags. I would not let an independent kind of body shop hire out someone to come in and fix these airbags. This is a properly deployed airbag. This was a police officer in New Jersey was involved in this case. The reason why I show this is when we're dealing with product liability cases, we have to make sure that the failed product is directly related to the injuries. In this case, this prevented his left side injuries. In the prior case, you know, when we're dealing with that BMW case, we want to make sure that his fatality, he was killed in this case, are related to left side trauma. We want to be able to say that the deployment of that airbag would have lessened or maybe even prevented that types of injuries. This is an interesting case. This is an interesting case of a person that was nice enough to crash test his car for us. This looks like a barrier test. But I put this up because, well, a couple of reasons. One is, does it pass the test? When we put this photo up in front of the jury going to believe that yes, his airbag should have deployed. And I believe they would. There's almost 2.5 feet of crush on the front of this vehicle. As you can see, the steering wheel rim and the airbag didn't deploy. This individual, when I spoke to him, made the following comments to me. And I asked him about his experience of driving the vehicle. Every time we get in a vehicle and we turn our cars on, it goes through a diagnostic check. That little airbag symbol we all have in our dash, if that airbag symbol doesn't go away, it stays illuminated, there's a problem with your airbag. Your airbag is not functioning. It went through some kind of electrical problem or processor, and it's not working. Me personally, had it happen twice to a Toyota 4Runner, had them replaced. I haven't had any problems since then. But this is why I put this up, because a little information is a little misleading too. The right side, if you look to the right side interior, the picture to the right, you can see the dashboard's pulled out. Well, that airbag did not deploy. And the police officer who was involved in the case took a crowbar and pulled the dashboard out, took the module out, and nailed the module to Ford and asked for assistance. The module is a metal box. The module will not tell any information in regards to the processor problem in this car. This is another example, another airbag example of someone else who fixed this car. When I spoke to the person, he said that his airbag light intermittently flicked on and off. And I kind of told the attorney, here's my expert opinion. Flickering is not a good issue when it comes to electronics in a car. Obviously, this had a serious issue. This was an interesting airbag case. And the reason why I say that is it shows you how technology has probably gotten better over the years. This airbag case was a Ford Taurus station wagon. You can see the impact. It was no direct damage to the front bumper, only to the left side quarter panel. It was more of very much of a lateral impact of a person who pulled out from the stop sign. But the lateral impact deployed the frontal airbag system. And what happened with this vehicle is they don't make this design anymore. This is the split front bench. You won't see these. You used to see them in pickup trucks. And what happened was they had the back seat down carrying fishing equipment and camping equipment. And they had a child positioned in the middle section. And you can see how that child, I believe he was 14. This happened in Elkhart, Indiana. He's out of position. Half his body is rearward, half his body's forward. The photo on the left side, the airbag, you can see that brownish kind of tint on the right side of the airbag. That was the contact point between the child and the seat and the airbag. And it actually wound up killing this individual. So now what they did, when you're talking about vehicular product liabilities, the one thing car companies are trying to do, are engineer out the people. They're trying to prevent the people from causing the problem. So what they did was they did away with this split bench type of design so a person can't sit in the middle. Press technology and the ability for sensors to sense lateral and frontal impacts has gotten better over the years. And here's a photo, kind of an overview photo, and you can see how the person inside the vehicle would be totally out of position. You can see the restraint system. It's only a lap belt, and that's why they did away with this design. You won't see this design in any other vehicles anymore. When we do analysis of airbag, it's gotten much, much better over the years. And we have equipment, Reconstruction came out with equipment that lets us download most of GM and Ford models. With the GM and Ford models, the GM vehicles have very user-friendly data. It gives us the speed of deployment. It gives us even the speed of a non-deployment. It tells us whether a person is wearing a seatbelt or not using their seatbelt. And it even tells us the acceleration patterns. And the reason, well, obviously, the speed of deployment is very crucial to the airbag deployment. And even in accident reconstruction cases, we will download these modules to get an acceleration pattern. For instance, if a person's at a stop sign and says I stopped and I went into the intersection and I got hit, we download these airbag acceleration patterns, and it shows that he's going the same speed for 5 seconds. Obviously, the person did not stop at the stop sign. This is the type of printout we have with the airbag systems. This is a GM download. Very user-friendly. The Ford downloads give us more information. They're recorded on 0.2-second variables, almost for 25 seconds, but it's not as user-friendly. You really do need an expert to be able to evaluate the Fords. And you can see I highlighted, it tells you the speed, it tells you whether they're wearing their non-deployment impact, for instance, if a person went off a roadway and hit a curb and proceeded after the curb to hit a tree. What a GM will tell us is how fast that curb impact was that didn't deploy the airbag and how fast the impact would be once he hit the tree. Okay, this will be the first part of the question and answer period. Certainly for some questions you have at this point, we'll talk about seatbelt failures. I have one question that was sent to me, which is I would assume was going to come up. He said, this individual says, I'm hoping the Toyota recalls are discussed. In particular, State Farm allegedly warned Toyota about accelerator problems in 2007. How damaging it is toward Toyota. Well, in product liability cases, the one thing we have to prove is notification. And the notification is that the vehicle manufacturer, car seat, whoever it is, are under either direct notice or constructive notice of the hazard or the problem. In most cases, most attorneys go for the constructive notice, and they try to demonstrate that a certain amount of failures have occurred over a certain amount of period of time, and that this car manufacturing company should know that the product was a problem. That's probably one of the stumbling blocks, and there's a big argument whether they knew or don't know. In this particular case with Toyota, they're not going to be able to argue about notice. They're stuck. They're stuck with notice, and the reason why Toyota is in a little bit of a problem is the component that was made by Toyota, the component that is in the Toyota vehicles that's the source of this campaign going on in the recalls is a component made by Toyota. In a lot of cases, like when you deal with airbag failures, the airbag failure is a piece of equipment that's inside a Toyota, but that piece of equipment could be made by like TRW. So then there's multiple people, multiple defense, people that you're basically suing or defending. In this case, Toyota's on its own. And I just saw another fact that said that I think they had 23 fatalities since 2007. So Toyota's got a serious problem, and the reason why they have a serious problem, in my opinion, is the problem is so easily fixed. It's just the accelerator cable to the accelerator pad itself. It's a very commonly fixed problem, so it's going to be interesting to see how they resolve these issues. If you have any other questions about Toyota, feel free to call me directly. We can have a dialogue. I don't want to waste up most of the time. Let's see. I have a couple questions here. Have you worked on belt or belt separation with rubber tread tire loss? Yes, I have, and we'll talk a little further about that, and I'll show you some failed tires.
Frank, I have a question from Ronald who asks, how long does the SVM retain collision data if the car is repaired? And can you download Honda data?
You can't download Honda data. Honda would have to be sent out to Honda. The SDN, you'll hear it referred to a couple ways, SDN, EDR. What he's basically talking is about the retrieval of the information from the car. Here's the situation. In GM vehicles, if your airbag deploys, GM has to replace the entire system. So once your vehicle is repaired and it's back into service, the module that you want to download is no longer available in that vehicle. Now, if you had access to the module itself, it could be downloaded years from now. It's like a burned CD, and it can be downloaded over and over again. Ford vehicles, in some Ford vehicles, they let them reset the modules. And we've had some success in getting old data out of Ford modules, but most car manufacturers right now are more comfortable replacing the entire system because they come in kits. So I'm now seeing Ford actually replacing the entire system too. I hope that answers that question.
Okay, I have a question from David who asks, and this is kind of a general question, but are there any hot areas in product liability? Is there anything particular that you have seen in the recent year or 6 months that is outside the norm?
It seems like the topic that comes up quite a bit is tire retread problems, especially with trucks. Whether the retreading process is made correctly or not correctly, because in my experience, most of the retread failures result in some serious injuries. I've seen a lot of retread failure investigations. Not too many airbag cases because airbags in themselves are so integrated into the car systems. It would be kind of unusual to see an airbag completely fail unless it's a repair issue. Seatbelts don't really happen that often, but I guess the hot product areas should be Toyota problems right now. Just a quick conversation with Toyota. The sudden acceleration problems were first brought to everybody's attention back in mid-80s when I was a federal investigator, the Audis. And the Audis back then defended their problem and actually was determined by the government that it was a misapplication of the accelerator pedal. So I'm wondering, I'm not with NHTSA anymore. I wonder if NHTSA is going to go back and readdress all those issues they had with Audi now that it's been proven that this type of accelerator problem can really exist.
Frank, I have one more from Sydney, and it looks like this will be the last one for this Q&A session. We are going to have a Q&A session after the presentation of content. But Sydney asks, with regard to Honda airbags, are burn injuries considered a defect or a side effect to be suffered in exchange for the aid of the airbag?
It's the second part. Burns from airbags are not considered a source of product defect. It's just the source of the equipment. You have to understand the airbags deployed about 125 miles an hour to prevent individuals from being injured by hitting other components. When they deploy something at 125 miles an hour, unfortunately, it's going to cause some injuries. I've ever seen people that sit maybe 10 inches away from the steering wheel rim or 8 inches away. I mean, the recommended distance is 12 inches. I've seen people actually killed by airbags that are sitting, they're 5'1", driving a utility vehicle, and they just can't reach the accelerator pedal, so they have their seat completely forward, and they're riding right up against the airbag. And these airbags, unless you give them enough distance, will not deploy properly, and you're actually getting hit kind of like a bullet at 125 miles an hour.
Okay, I don't see any additional questions, so why don't we move on to the presentation of content. Okay,
this next case I put in here because every time I see it, it makes me laugh too. But this was a seatbelt failure that I drove down to North Carolina. Let's kind of digress to one thing, the Delta V. You have when you're looking at a product liability case, and we'll start talking about seatbelts and seatbacks, we're really looking at Delta Vs less than 25 miles an hour. We're going to deal with, cases come through, components failed, but the Delta Vs are catastrophic. They're up like 50, 55 miles an hour. And, these vehicles are not tanks. At a certain threshold, they're going to start failing. So when we do this, that's why we need to calculate a Delta V. And when I this person told me about this case, I told him to send me photos first, and he was adamant that I come down to see the vehicle, and he didn't feel comfortable with me making an assessment off of photos first. So I went down to look at this vehicle, took the frontal measurements, and calculated the delta V. It's below the threshold. So it's supposed to be a driver failure case, and when we look at this driver belt, you can see that the driver belt is separated. No doubt about it, it's separated. So could you see the separation is made in real sharp lines? It did not take me more than probably 10 minutes of looking at this belt to turn around to the attorney and say, your individual was hurt in the case, and the EMTs cut his belt to get it out. That's how simple this analysis was. And I told him, I really wish you would have sent me photos because, you know, it was kind of a waste of time and money for everybody. But that's why if you're doing product liability cases, you're going to hire out an expert. You know, make sure everything's documented and given to him first, so he can first look at it to see if it's something to really pursue. This was just a simple EMT taking a utility knife and cutting a belt. This case, what happened in New Orleans too, was a fatality of a police officer. This was something you don't see too often. It was a midsection failure of a seatbelt. And you can see how the belt is frayed, how it starts to become frayed, and don't see this too often. But the interesting part of this case is, if we were all in a class, I'd ask the question, there's two people involved in this case. One was a driver who died. One was a passenger who walked away uninjured. They were both wearing the seatbelts in the same car. You know, what is the overriding difference of these two people in this collision that, you know, caused one to die and one not to die? And the answer is the driver was 320 pounds where the passenger was about 160. So when we're dealing with forces applied to the seatbelt, it's the same force applied to the car, same delta V, but it's not the same force applied to the seatbelt system because we have individuals who are different weights. This case, you know, a very tragic case. Digressing a little bit to airbag cases. Airbag failures, when I first started doing this back in the early 90s, and in these cases too, that's why I came up, the thought came up. The attorneys used to sue under notification. When we had, for instance, Subaru or had a history of low-speed impacts, where a car would hit someone going 3 miles an hour and would deploy their airbag. They used to sue back then under notification saying these people are unaware that these airbags can do A, B, C, and D. Well, that used to be a way around a direction the plaintiff's attorneys would take. Nowadays, when you get in the car, there's more stickers inside the cars about airbags in the owner's manual, in the cars. So the car companies are trying to notify people about the airbags. Don't sit close to them. So the notification of the airbags over the years have gotten better. You were in the classroom. We have 41 attendees in this webinar. If I asked everybody when was the last time you read your owner's manual, or if you read it at all, I would be surprised if half of us read the owner's manual. But this is a tragic seatback case. This was a fatality of an infant at Children's National Medical Center. In fact, the person gave birth and was on their way home after they gave birth, and the accident happened, and it was a fatality. The reason why I say seatback failure, this is a tragic case. Years ago, I don't know how many of us owned the old the van style, like the 3-seat vans, where the third seat used to be able to come out. We would unlatch it. We could take the whole fence seat out. Studies have shown over the time, and I've done many of them, where the third seats fail. And they fail and they move forward. And unfortunately, in those situations, as everybody probably knows, the people that are positioned in the third seats are usually kids. So the government encouraged the car companies to come up with alternative designs to try to engine out engineer out people. They just weren't comfortable with the idea that we were going to put this high duty of care on people to put these seats in, lock them down, and make sure they're locked down correctly and they didn't roll forward. So now in the vans we see these stow and go type of seats where they're actually able to stow up, stow back, some go actually completely inside. But this case is, kind of a sad case because if you read in the owner's manual what it tells the person to do when they first have the seat up and bring it back down onto this base, and I'll show you the metal base, is to actually sit on it. And an individual who sits on it will lock it in place, or, when you're bringing it down, bring it with force enough to lock it in place. Well, this was a new vehicle for these people. They had this seat stowed up for a certain reason. And when they picked up the baby, they did a couple tragic things wrong. First is they put the baby in the right rear seating position, what was incorrect. Should have been in the middle seating position. But when they were involved in an accident, the seat was not locked down correctly. And as it came up, it crushed the infant between the front seat and the rear seat. They have tried to tighten up this notification where there's actually stickers now that tell people how to do it. But even in this effort to be able to engineer out people, you can see in this case it was a person who was the main source of probably this fatality. There's the locking mechanism you can see. Tire forensics, there was one guy who asked me about tire forensics. Yes, I see this all the time. This was a case in my area where it was a fatality. It was a crossover accident. This vehicle was traveling down a road, and the driver said the following. She says, I heard a bang, and I lost control of my steering. I just couldn't steer. She crossed over. When we want to look at this vehicle for this criminal, I was actually doing the criminal defense of the case. This tire that you see on the bottom two pictures was not on the vehicle itself. What the tow body shop did was they replaced the right front tire for towing purposes. So when we got this tire, I had a little checklist to go through, and I asked him where the tire was. He directed me to the trash bin. I got this vehicle out. This is called a facial separation of a tire. Facial separations happen in various reasons, but usually they're overweight, they're underinflated, or they're just plain, abused. That's usually the cause is a tire or they hit something. In this case, it was an older tire. Don't know the tire pressure of this vehicle, but all the other tire pressures on the truck were about 13 pounds. Heated up, and we had this tire separation. In this case, this tire tread separation would not be a product liability against the tire manufacturer because the tire was so old and abused. It's actually, this proceeded, I heard, in the private end, proceeded to follow a course actually directed to the driver as far as his liability towards his vehicle. This is another tragic case going up to New York. This is a passenger van, 14 passenger van. This tire failed. You can see that the bottom picture where the arrows are, this tire separation, the facial part came off the tire. And unfortunately what happens in most cases when these tires fail, the person reacts and oversteers, and it's a high center of gravity. It rolled the vehicle. It ejected two kids inside the vehicle and killed them both. When we did this investigation, my experience said, get the tire, found the tire. See this little hole down in the tire, down in the bottom part? Well, the right front tire, you see that little orange piece? If we were all here in a class, I'd ask you what it is, but just to kind of speed things up, that's a plug. And unfortunately, the federal requirements are that passenger vans' tires do not be plugged. Because what happens is there's so many people in the van, there's so much heat buildup, the air actually starts to seep through the plugs, and it's trapped between carcass and the facial tread, and it builds up to a point where there's a catastrophic blowout of the tread. You can see in this case that the point of this would be the person who actually decided to plug this tire. Okay, commonly viewed things when you're dealing with information in regards to product liability cases. You want to be as complete as possible. You want the person to actually do a scene inspection. Sometimes it seems like it's not something that would be necessary, but you want the individual to be able to go to the scene and see what was struck in the case, especially if it's some kind of tree or fence post. You want to be able to say correctly if it's an immovable object, and that's an important feature in doing these calculations. We want to be able to conduct vehicle inspections. The quicker the better. Statements and depositions. And usually, to be honest with you, the answer to the interrogatories aren't very helpful most of the times. They usually get vague and not to the point, and they don't answer it. And a great source of research is a couple of databases you'll see that are sponsored by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. NHTSA sponsors an injury program called Siren. And what Siren does is it correlates people's injuries to automobile collisions. NAS is a very comprehensive kind of data collection base. You can access that through their websites through dot.gov. And you can do searches like query searches and find out how many frontal accidents have happened with a Ford Explorer with a certain Delta V, and you can actually do research that way. FARS is the Fatal Action Reporting System. That is just kind of like a paper type of system. But if you're looking for fatality trends, that's be an excellent source of information. We have about 5 minutes. I look here. Let's look through. Matt, we got any questions here?
I'm sorry?
Do we have any questions?
Yes, we do. David asked, what should we look for in tire thread cases? You said PD cases are expensive. How much for tire cases?
Well, first thing about tire cases, the reason why tire cases become a little difficult is the proper evaluation of a tire is a very invasive type of inspection, where we actually, once the inspection's done, very unlikely that tire is going to look like anything it looked like before. So the defense and the plaintiffs and all the experts have to get together and basically do the same type of analysis themselves. How much do they cost? I mean, I just got done one, and now I would be surprised if the cost of the experts and all involved don't run 6 figures, to be honest with you. Anything else?
Okay, Howard asked, should a tire be capable of wearing down to 2/32 of an inch without sustaining a steel belt-to-belt separation with rubber tread loss?
Oh, yeah, it should be able to, but the problem is the other environmental situations with that tire. Depends what it's on. The heavier the vehicle, the more likely it is to have tread separation. For instance, you know, some of the utility vehicles now out on the road are about 5,000 pounds, where a smaller sedan runs about 2,300 pounds. So it really depends what type of vehicle that tire is on, but if it's properly inflated, properly maintained, it should be able to get down to 2/23. That's pretty flat, but if it's proper, you know, the whole thing is the pressure in the tire. And you can see when we have tire failures, the big problem is that the separation usually causes a separation of the body and the rim. So the question about whether the tire was underinflated becomes an issue that most times can't be answered.
Okay, Tim asked, a driver's side airbag did not deploy, but the passenger side airbag did on a VW Jetta. There was forward impact, no prior repairs to the airbag. Does it automatically follow the bag was defective, or can other valid reasons account for the non-deployment? impact point, speed, etc.?
I don't know what kind of VW jet it is, but in the newer vehicles, there's seat sensors. And what seat sensors, you'll hear a term called dual threshold. And what a dual deployment or dual threshold is, the seat sensors, what it does now is it determines whether someone's wearing their seatbelt or not wearing their seatbelt. So in the case that you have this this Jetta, it could be a situation where the driver's not wearing, let's see, which one deployed? The driver's
sorry, you can probably see it on your screen, but it looks like the passenger side airbag did not deploy, or the driver's side airbag did not deploy, but the passenger side airbag did deploy.
Yeah, it could be a situation where the driver's wearing a seatbelt. In most states it's required now, and the passenger's not in this case. What the car sees in itself is it sees the need or the need to deploy the airbags in different thresholds. It will see that driver's side as being more protected than the passenger side. So you may have a situation where airbags don't deploy and do deploy. You look at it kind of facially and go, it looks strange, but it has to probably do with seat sensors and airbag and restraint system sensors.
Okay, we have a question from Robert who asks, are airbags still tracked by serial number from the manufacturer to installer? Can a reinstalled airbag be conclusively proved to be operable without a post-deployment exam? Frank?
Yeah, I'm reading the question.
Sorry.
Hold on. Airbags are tracked via their serial number by TRW, who usually makes most of their airbags. So on the airbag module itself, once you get to the module, there will be a tracking number on the module itself, allowing you to know what company actually made that airbag module. Can a reinstall be conclusively provided and be operable without a... you'll get body shops to try to... let me try to explain this quickly. Person who's an independent contractor of a body shop gets a car in and needs an airbag deployment. What they do is it's actually stealing. What they'll do is they'll ask for all the equipment for the airbag module system, and when it comes in, they'll actually only deploy the airbag modules and not the EDR system. In most cases, these systems can't be reset. So the individual car will start to see their light counter. It won't go through a diagnostic check. They can reset it, but it won't be functionable. And in most cars, it will sense that and not let the airbag light go off. I hope I answered that question correctly.
Okay, Howard asks, what is the duty of the manufacturer to warn of safe tire tread depth?
That's an interesting question. I mean, that's really why we get our vehicles inspected, because there are a certain amount of tread depth that allows a tire to be on the roadway. I mean, the duty of the manufacturer to warn for safe tire depth, like I said, there's so many other variables in regards to that tire. I've never seen a warning from a tire manufacturer in regards to, hey, if it gets to a certain level, replace the tire. They really are relying upon the individual. They kind of put the duty on the individual and the inspection facilities to take out tires that won't pass inspection. That's one of the reasons why we have inspections.
Okay, I have a question here. You had talked about the ability to download data earlier in the presentation. And it seems like on the American models, the data is easily downloaded, whereas with some of the foreign models, you have to send it to the manufacturer to get the data downloaded. Is that true? And B, is there anything that is wrong with that? Like, is there any error that can occur when the data is sent back to the manufacturer and that manufacturer is able to download it and send it for review?
Well, that's a good question, and it's like the chicken and the egg type of thing. When we send the module, before we had equipment to be able to download modules, every module had to be sent in to a car manufacturer. And I've never had a car manufacturer come back and say the module's bad. So the answer would be that, when we send a module to, say, Honda, I would be shocked if Honda came back and told you something was wrong with the module itself. And unfortunately, the data that is downloaded for cars that aren't accessible through these systems, it basically comes out like in a ticker tape type of information. It has to be decoded by the car company. So we're really at the mercy of the car company to be able to help us out. And that's why the Delta Vs are so important, because if you get a car that hit a pole and deployment thresholds, the must deployment we call must fires. The must fires occur about, greater than 20 miles an hour. Well, if you get a car that hit a tree and you're calculating a Delta V of 50, and you ask for assistance of Honda and you send the module out to Honda and Honda says nothing's wrong, that doesn't explain why a Delta V of 50 did not deploy that airbag. So you still have a course of being able to pursue a plaintiff's case against them. The one problem that the car manufacturers presently have is most of their technicians that do the defense type of work are employees of the company. So you can imagine the pressure that's on these individuals to see things their way. They don't, I know a lot of them, friends of mine, that it would be really uncommon for one of them to come out and say, yes, your vehicle did fail.
Okay, we have a question from Howard who asks, what about operating tires in hot climates such as Florida, Arizona, Southern California? Does rubber lose its properties at higher temperatures?
Absolutely. There's when you look at tire failure charts, you can see that the rate of tire failures increase as the weather increases, or actually increases in areas where there's snow because salt degrades tires. But temperature is the number one thing that causes tires to have issues. It's gonna, if the roadway's hot, it's going to generate more hot internal temperatures of the tires. So you're going to see more tire failures in the hotter states than in the colder states.
Okay, there being no further questions, I'm going to wrap things up here. I'm going to leave the meeting open until 3 o'clock, but I wanted to thank everybody for coming out and especially thank Frank for putting together an excellent presentation. Thank you, Frank, for the time and the effort that you put into this. If you have a particular legal matter that you'd like to talk to Frank about, you can contact us at 800-523-2319. We will be sending out a link to the archived recording of this webinar later on this afternoon. If you'd like to see a video of Frank, he did a webinar last week that we videotaped, and that's up on our website in our Knowledge Center. I will send the link to that video out as well after this webinar is over. Our next client-focused webinar, 5 high liability problems at live events, including concerts, arenas, sporting events, will take place on February 25th at 2010 at 2 p.m. If you didn't receive an invitation to this one and would like to attend, you can email me at mhyde@pastanet.com. If you have any follow-up questions or comments, we're always looking for feedback. We want to make these the best that they can be. Please send them to me at mhyde@pastanet.com. On behalf of Frank and everybody here at CASA, I thank you for taking an hour out of your busy day to spend with us. And I will leave this meeting open until the top of the hour, 3 o'clock Eastern Time. You can submit any questions that you may have for Frank that you didn't get in during the 2 Q&A sessions. If you have additional questions for Frank, you can send them to me at mhyde@pastanet.com, and I will make sure that Frank gets them and let you know how you can get in touch with Frank. So thank you, Frank. Thank you for everybody who attended.
Thank you very much.